All right, let's talk about that feeling. You see these incredible AI automation demos online, and you think, I could build that, only to get your hands dirty and realize, whoa, this is way more complicated than it looks. Sound familiar? Well, you're definitely not alone. So in this explainer, we're going to break down two totally different ways to think about building AI automations. We've got the powerful manual approach versus a much simpler AI native one, all based on our source material. Okay, so here's the game plan. First, we'll tackle that whole promise versus reality thing with AI automation. Then, we're going to put two different platforms head-to-head with three real-world challenges. And to wrap it all up, we'll get into what our source material calls the AI first difference. Let's go. All right, first things first, let's talk about the promise versus the reality. You know, it's what I like to call the automation gap. It's that feeling you get when you see these jaw-dropping AI demos, but when you actually try to build one yourself, you just hit a wall of complexity. It's a super common feeling. I mean, you see these demos of AI agents that can basically run your entire life for you, right? And it seems so easy. But then, when it's your turn to actually create one, yeah, the reality can be a real shock to the system, especially if you're not a coder. And honestly, it often just leads to a lot of frustration. And, our source video just hits the nail on the head with this. It really gets that for most people who aren't hardcore developers, that journey from a brilliant idea to a working automation is just full of these unexpected roadblocks. And frankly, a lot of people just end up giving up. So the big question is, how do we actually bridge that gap? Well, our source material explores this by putting two platforms side by side. And what's interesting is they have two completely different philosophies about how you should even build an automation in the first place. Okay, so on one side, you've got a tool called N8N. The source describes this one as the powerhouse. It gives you total control. It uses what's called a node-based system. So picture a digital flowchart where you're dragging and dropping and connecting all these different blocks of logic. It's amazing for customization, but yeah, it comes with a pretty steep learning curve. Then on the other side, you have Lindy. And this one is presented as a totally streamlined, AI-first kind of tool that's all about a simple, intuitive, step-by-step flow. All right, let's get into our first challenge and see how these two philosophies actually play out in the real world. We're going to start with something I think we can all relate to, creating a smart tool to manage an overflowing inbox. I mean, this is such a classic, super practical use case, right? The goal is to build an AI that can actually read your emails, understand what they're about, slap the right tags on them, and maybe even draft a quick response to a potential lead. Pretty cool. So, according to the source, building this in N8N is a pretty involved, multi-step process. You start with a trigger to grab your emails, sure, but then you have to manually process all that data, create variables for it, ship it off to an external AI like ChatGPT for classification, and then you have to build a whole other set of filters just to apply the tags. Every single one of those steps has to be configured and connected perfectly. Okay, now let's see the other side of the coin. The video shows a totally different approach with Lindy. Here, the whole process is way more direct. It's just a series of simple triggers and conditions. So an email comes in, a condition checks what it's about, and then an action happens. That could be adding a label or, and this is cool, having a built-in AI agent draft a reply using your own knowledge base. And this right here, this really drives home the difference in setup time, at least based on the source's estimate. For an expert builder, the N8N workflow is going to take over 15 minutes. The Lindy version, just a few minutes. That's a pretty big difference. All right, let's level up for our next challenge. This one's a bit more advanced. We're talking about automatically turning a meeting recording into a bunch of ready-to-share social media posts. I mean, isn't this the dream for anyone who creates content? You just have a meeting, and boom, an AI agent grabs the transcript and spins it into gold. Tweets, LinkedIn posts, the whole shebang, all without you having to lift a finger. Now, the source material shows that building this with N8N is, well, it's pretty complex. There are a lot of moving parts. To get it to work, you've got to connect to external databases like Supabase just to store info. You're making specific web requests to pull data. You're dealing with all sorts of data conversions. It's definitely powerful and super flexible for sure, but it means you're basically juggling a bunch of different services at once. So how does that AI-first approach handle this? Well, the Lindy workflow is shown as a way more straightforward linear process. You just trigger it with a meeting link. The tool itself records the call. A built-in AI agent chews on the transcript and creates the content. And then the final output just gets saved right into a Google Doc. Super streamlined. Okay, for our last challenge, we are going for the gold. We're talking about building something really ambitious. A true conversational AI assistant that can actually manage your schedule for you. This is really the kind of stuff most of us picture when we think about AI, right? An assistant that can understand a simple, natural request like, hey, schedule a meeting with Jane, and then actually go and talk to your calendar and your email to make it happen. So the source shows this being built in Lindy, and the approach is really interesting. You basically create a single AI agent, and then you just give it a bunch of different skills. So you could give it a calendar skill to create events and a Gmail skill to draft emails. And the amazing part is it can use all of them based on just one single chat message. And this is where it really clicks. The video shows this simple, plain English command getting the job done in less than a minute. The system doesn't just seek keywords. It understands the entire sentence and knows it needs to do two things: create the calendar event and draft the invitation email, all from that one prompt. So what's the big takeaway from all this? What's the crucial difference here? Well, according to the source, it all boils down to a fundamental difference in their core design philosophy. The source breaks this AI-first philosophy down into 4 key things, but the biggest one is this. AI isn't just some extra tool you call on at the end. It's actually woven into every single step of the process. And that's huge because it means the system can understand the context from what happened before. This not only simplifies the whole user interface, but, as we're about to see, it makes troubleshooting way more intuitive. Yeah, and this troubleshooting part is honestly fascinating. Think about it. Instead of getting some cryptic error code that you have to go in Google for an hour, the source shows the system just explaining the problem to you in plain English. It's like having a helpful coworker lean over and say, hey, just so you know, that meeting transcript was too short for me to summarize. It's a total game changer. And all of this leaves us with a really powerful question to chew on, doesn't it? This whole comparison points to a future where building these complex automations isn't just for developers anymore. I mean, if the barrier to entry keeps dropping this fast, who gets to be a builder? What kind of incredible, creative, and maybe even world-changing tools will they come up with? It's definitely something to think about.